Let's talk about basic uh, statutes or basic laws which govern the payment of these wages and salaries. The very first act which was there, which existed, and you can see the year out there, 1936, the Payment of Wages Act, was when the Britishers still ruled our country. So you can imagine how these things were, and if you can recall the context that in industrial era when it was started in late 19th century, at that point of time the slavery kind of thing was still there in the around the world. The countries were colonies of these strong nations. India was a colony for such a long time. So there, when these colonies, the people were working for the ruling countries, there was no concept of paying wages to them. It was like, okay, if the employer thought it to be prudent, they might pay something to the worker, maybe in cash, maybe in kind, and it was certain, it was not really. I mean, any good worker will be treated well. Somebody who's not working well may not be kind of hired. So that was the kind of condition of that era used to be. To regulate that sort of a thing, the British the Britishers had to pass certain laws. So the Payment of Wages Act 1936 is one of them, which provided for regular payment of wages without unauthorized deductions to person employees in any industrial establishment. So you see that there has to be a certain standardized way of paying. That is what, as simple as that. Otherwise, without this sort of statutes, the employers were not ready to pay their employees, or they used to kind of penalize them on any pretext which they found suitable. And then the worker who had worked would feel cheated, right? So, slowly, when these trade unions started forming, they pressurized the governments to make certain laws around it. So, what happened? These acts permits the following permissible deduction, that these are the only things where the wages could be deducted. It could be things like fines, deduction for absences, deductions for loss of goods entrusted to the workers, house given by the employer, advances given by the employer. So if the advance has been given, the employer can definitely deduct it in installments in the salary, every month's salary. Provident fund, because as per statute again, the employer is supposed to contribute something from his own pocket, and also the employee is supposed to put in something for the future saving, for the future fund. So for that provident fund coming from the employee's side, that deduction can be made, while the equal amount, or 12% of that, has to be paid from the employer side as well. Insurance premium, again, if the employer is providing certain health coverage, medical insurance coverage kind of thing, that minimal insurance premium can be deducted from the wage or the salary of that worker, right? So this is how the Payment of Wages Act, that is the highlight, that one has to pay and the deductions have to be logical. That was the gist of this Payment of Wages Act. Now, then after that, there was this act which was passed in 1948, which described the Minimum Wages Act. So, this payment of wages never had any, I would say, benchmarks or standards for what the minimum wages would be. It could be again anything. But today, this Minimum Wages Act is that wage that must be invariable be paid, whether employee or big or small, profit making profit or not. So wages are have to be paid and at a certain minimum level. So if you recall, we had discussed about various terminologies: minimum wage, need based minimum wage, fair wages, living wages. So all that is being taken care of in this kind of act. So this 15th labor conference in 1957, because see, these all these laws, they keep amending depending on the environment, the economic circumstances, and everything. It quantifies minimum wages as thus: minimum food requirement based on calorie intake, clothing requirement on basis of per capita consumption of 28 yards per annum, 72 for all four members. So it's basically talking about roti kapda makan kind of thing. Rent corresponding to the minimum housing area under government industrial housing scheme. So it's a very basic sort of thing. If you see, fuel, lighting, and other miscellaneous items of expenditure should constitute 20% of the minimum wage. So this is how they calculate Minimum Wage Act. And as these sort of things which are they talking about, food, clothing, and all, there also the rates are changing over a period of time. So this minimum wages are also revised from time to time. Like for example, when we were talking of 2016, this was what Delhi, because this minimum wages act again is regulated on the state wise basis. There is a certain central norm at the central level. The central government will come out and calculate certain thing, but then each state will have their own minimum wages as per their cost of living, as per their food requirement. So each region in India, being such a large country, so each state has that kind of authority given that they will be able to decide their own minimum wages. For example, as I was saying, in Delhi, the it was that minimum wages were being proposed in 2016 as this kind of thing, 14,000 a month. Then now current, if you see, this is the latest minimum wage for shops and establishment in Delhi. It is to the tune of, for unskilled worker, 15,492 per month. For semi-skilled, 17,000 something, so on and so forth. So basis the clothing, food, rents of the house and basic miscellaneous needs, this sort of calculation is done, and this is revised after every certain time. So this is what payment of minimum wages is all about. This is again a law uh, which has to be complied with by the organizations and by the governments. They make sure that it is being complied with. Then is the payment of bonus act. Now payment of bonus act, we've already talked about bonus being the enterprise level of incentive, and in India it is much more acceptable than profit sharing. Why? Because this the objective of this act is basically to reward employee of an organization by sharing profits earned, and it's linked to productivity. So the moment the organization shows certain profits and all, it will have that requirement by the law that the bonus has to be paid out from minimum 1 month salary to the 20% of the CTC of the employee. When we talk of cost to the company, we are only talking about the basic pay and the DA of the 12 months. This is applicable to any establishment with 20 or more employees or any factory with 10 or more employees. Eligibility: employees drawing 21,000 per month or less, that is basic plus DA excluding other allowances, and have completed 30 working days in a financial year are eligible for bonus payment. Now, what are the components of bonus? Salary or wages include only basic and DA for bonus payment, and the rest of the allowance are excluded. So, basic and DA is what it is all about. Their calculations are based on that. Now, minimum and maximum and time limits on bonus payment. Bonus should be paid at minimum rate of 8.33 and maximum rate of 20% of the annual basic plus DA of the employee of each level. So every employee at different level will have a different kind of bonus being paid to them. Now, this code of wages is a very recent thing. Last year in 2019, it was a bill which was floated in the parliament and now has been an act. It is an act because it has received assent of the President of India on 8th of August last year, 2019. The act has not been enforced so far because government has yet to notify the date of applicability of the complete act or different dates for different provision for the commencement of court. Because of this pandemic and lockdown and all, the things got delayed. But I hear in September or October 2020, the things are now again moving in this particular direction to enforce this particular act. The code has 68 sections in 9 chapters, which subsume means these four acts: the Payment of Wage Act, the Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Payment of Bonus Act 1965, and Equal Remuneration Act 1976. These four acts are now no more existing. So whatever conditions or definitions were there in these four acts are now subsumed by the Code of Wages 2019. So these are the kind of things which are now all under as per the Code of Wages Act, which is what is the applicability. So wherever they were these different Wages Act and Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Wages Act, and Payment of Bonus Act had different definitions as far as their applicability was concerned. So it unifies the applicability, that it is applicable to all organized and unorganized sector, so on and so forth. So this is Once it is enforced, we can find that these would be the this code of wages would be now taken into consideration for any such matter related to wages and the bonuses, so on and so forth. So whatever definitions of, let's say, contract labor, employer, wages, worker, they were having slight differences in various acts. Now they've all come together and we are treating them as per defined by the code of wages, right? The next statute which impacts our wage plans and all is the Payment of Gratuity Act. Now, gratuity is basically related to the word gratitude. So, it is a way of showing gratitude by the employer. It is a voluntary payment made by the employer to the employee in recognition of continuous meritorious services and sincere effort by the employee towards the organization. It is payable to an employee, nominee in case of death of the employee, who has rendered continuous service of 5 years. So, minimum 5 years of continuous service is what is required for an employee to get entitled for a gratuity. And then once the person is terminated or superannuates or retires or resigns, then he is entitled to have that particular amount as a gratitude. So 5 years of meritorious service is required, continuous 5 years, to be eligible for this particular gratuity. The completion of continuous service of 5 years is not necessary where termination of employment is due to death or disablement due to accident or disease. The gratuity limit as per section 4 subsection 3 it has been raised from 3.5 lakhs to 10 lakhs with effect from May 2010. Gave advantage both to private and public sector employees. Why? Because it, according to this, the maximum gratuity exemption as per IT Act also increases to rupees 10 lakh. So whatever is the payment which is made as per gratuity, then it is not taxable, and so 10 lakhs becomes the again something which an employee gets a benefit of. He or she doesn't have to pay any tax on it. So how this is calculated, that 15 days of basic pay plus DA for the number of years served multiplied by that salary on which the person was is what your gratuity is. So that is how the gratuity is calculated, which is again mentioned and defined as per the this particular act. So this finishes with our brief introduction that what all goes into when we are devising various wages and we are making various plans, because we have to take care of legalities and the acts which are there supporting this sort of remuneration which governs the wage plans.